Welcome to episode number 257, where I'm speaking with Kamalesh Ginger Hooven about the qualities of the mind, and in particular, how these qualities are affected through seasonal change and in the autumn season. We talk about the 4 states of the mind, we talk about navigating emotional times, and Kamalesh gives lots of tips on how to balance the mind and the body. So please stay tuned. Welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host, Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, which is the ancient healing tradition from India. Now, if you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. And if you like the content, please be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so the new episodes will automatically download for you. Also, you may want to check out my private Elements community, which is away from social media. It's a safe space for like-minded people to come together, to connect, to share, to support each other, and to continue the conversation from the podcast episodes. Check out the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com, and just click on the community tab. And I hope to connect with you there. Thanks for listening. And now here's a new episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. Today, I'm very happy to welcome back Kamalesh Ginger Hooven, who is interim Provost of Mount Madonna Institute, a regionally accredited college located on the central coast of California, where she is the director of the Ayurvedic Yoga Therapy program. Kamalesh has a master's degree in Ayurveda and is a certified Ayurvedic practitioner, as well as a certified yoga therapist. Kamalesh divides her time between California and her home in Antigua, Guatemala. Kamalesh, it's a pleasure to have you back on the podcast. Welcome.
Equal, Colette. I'm so excited about being here and visiting with you again. I love our conversations.
Yes, I do too. I really find them really enriching, and also that you have such a wealth of knowledge with yoga and Ayurveda, and I appreciate your perspective on both. And I'm also looking forward to our conversation today on yogic and Ayurvedic psychology. And in particular, I think it's a great time to touch on this subject because we're entering into Vata season in the Northern Hemisphere, a time when the weather can be cool and dry and windy, which can aggravate Vata. And this aggravation can have an impact on our mental health as well. So I think this would be a good place to start, maybe talking about the Vata season and why it has this impact on our mental health. What's happening?
Thanks, Colette. Well, we think about Vata. The first thing we think about is its quality of mobility and movement. And when we think about the mind moving too much, that quality of just too much mental activity, then we begin to see how easily it might be out of balance, right? Our qualities of Vata, cold and dry and rough and mobile and subtle. So thinking about the quality of mobility and how the mind can easily fluctuate during the time of Vata, and how we can have some tips and hints for ourselves that will help us to keep our mind balanced as we're moving into this season. Well, first, let's go into the gunas. So there are 3 gunas, or 3 qualities. The word guna just means quality. There are 3 qualities when we are looking at the mind itself. And these are the 3 qualities that are of matter, of our physical properties in our body, in our world, in our being. And it's sattva, rajas, and tamas. So sattva we can think of as balance and purity and the perfect place to be. Tamas, you can think of it as dullness and inactivity, but you can also think of it as stability and being grounded. And then rajas, which is activity, and movement. And it can be too much movement or too much stability can be what's affecting the mind. In Prakriti and matter, those three gunas, those three qualities are in perfect balance at the very beginning of creation. And then there is a wobble with Rajas, that sort of wobble that starts creation underway. And with that wobble, Rajas is making all of our universe unfold. It's the principle of evolution, and the principle of everything is activity, movement. And when there's too much of that activity and movement, then our mind can often reach an unstable state. So we need those qualities of tamas to bring it back to a sattvic state. I love my professor, Dr. Singh, Ramar Singh from India. He always drew a triangle at the bottom of a teeter-totter. And at the very bottom of the triangle, he would call that sattva, just a little triangle. And then just imagine a teeter-totter going across it. And then on one side is another triangle that's rajas. On the other side of the teeter-totter is a triangle that's tamas. Okay. Our whole life is spent balancing rajas and tamas and bringing them into balance. So when rajas becomes way too out of balance, we need the tamasic qualities of stability and a little bit of inertia to help bring us back into a stable, balanced, pure state. Same thing when we have too much of tamas, when we are couch potatoes and we can't get up and go anywhere and our mind seems dull and unstable, then we need that rajasic, that movement, that mobility quality to bring us back into balance. So it's a daily balance of rajas and tamas. It's a moment-to-moment thing. We do it very unconsciously. Yeah. And we can, in the times that we need it, like this change of season, especially in the changes of season, we can be much more purposeful in thinking about how we are controlling rajas and being out of balance, that little bit of too much rajas. So we can think of that in terms of food and things of lifestyle and in the herbs that we're taking. But we can also think about what daily practices we might do that would help bring us back into balance. So it's so interesting to think about how much control we do have and how little control we often think we have.
Yes. And this is where it's important to have the understanding, right, of the qualities, to have this wisdom from yoga and Ayurveda to understand that the mind is malleable, that we have the ability to direct these energies or these qualities of the mind, so that they're not taking us for a ride, that we can have them when we need them in our daily life. As you said, it's a moment to moment transition between these subtle qualities, but also we can make sure that they don't get too aggravated once we have the awareness. And I think the awareness is the most important thing, so that we can watch ourselves and see when we're getting too tamasic or too rajasic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just even realizing the slightest moment that perhaps this needs the opposite quality that I think can help bring us back into balance. You know, the quality of Vata, cold, is thinking about lunchtime sometimes, and it's chilly outside because fall is coming in, and maybe even you're lucky enough where you are to have a little rain, or maybe you have too much rain. But when you think of like the qualities of cold and dry and rough, so like choosing a salad for lunch, that's a no-no. Yeah. And it affects not only the body, but it affects the mind. When you choose that light and airy and cold quality for your lunch, your body and your mind are both reacting to it equally, not just the digestive system, but your whole digestive system, which is you, the wholeness of you, your being. We can't separate mind and body. That is all together. So whatever affects your body will affect your mind, and whatever affects your mind will affect your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really goes back to that principle of like increases like and opposites balance.
Absolutely.
And yeah, which is essentially what's happening in Vata season, where we're becoming aggravated because of the like qualities of Vata that appear in the environment. Like we said, the cool, dry, windy weather is aggravating those qualities of Vata, therefore affecting the body and the mind, as you said.
Absolutely. And so if we don't counterbalance that with those tamasic qualities of stability, so, maybe instead of having a salad, you have a nice warm soup, just something that also can bring the opposite qualities into the balancing. Yeah.
So what are some of the ways, can you give us examples of some of the ways that the body, and in particular the mind, can be affected in Vata season?
Well, let's go back a little bit and look just at the qualities of the mind. In yoga and Ayurveda, we talk about the antakarana, which just means the four minds. And I love that. It's like, when you first learned in high school or junior high, probably junior high, that there were lots of words for love in Latin. There was agape, and there were all these different words for love, and it made so much sense where, if there was a friendship love or a partner love or a love for a child, so all of those different loves. Well, in Ayurveda and yoga, we have different words for the mind. And it's really good in my sense of looking at the mind to separate those out and for us just to at least be aware of it. We have what's called Chitta, or the field of consciousness. And that's where all thoughts are. And that's where all thoughts reside, all thoughts that ever were, that ever will be. Outside of space and time is the Chit. And all of our thoughts go there. All of our thoughts have come from there. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but just go with it for a moment. Then we have the Buddhi, which is our intellect or our discriminating wisdom. And that often draws on what I'm going to call a cosmic consciousness that we all have access to. We have Manas, which is our recording faculty, which is the one we're usually talking about. These are the things that have come in through sensory input. This is our recording faculty. We remember what we did. We know what we did. We saw what we did. And we felt what we did, we heard what we did, and all of those, that sensory input is coming in, and that is recording it, and we're using that recording faculty to make further judgments moving down the line. And then the last is Ahankara. And Ahankara, I'm sorry to say, in the School of Yoga and Ayurveda, we've translated that as the word ego. But in our Western world, when we say the word ego, people start layering on all sorts of Freudian and Jungian principles of ego and the egoistic, and all you think about is yourself and selfishness. And that is not what ahankar means. It means I am action. I am aham. I am kar, action. I am movement. I am something. I am separate. So it's really our individuality, our mind, that separates us from that cosmic consciousness. But when we evolute back, we can draw on that cosmic consciousness. And I mention those four minds because when we think about how we can help ourselves, we can draw beyond our memory and our own sensory input through our buddhi, our cosmic intelligence, and our intelligence of discrimination and making good choices. So often we have different ways of viewing things that come into our world, and just to think about there being four minds. For us, all of us have one. We all separated and have one identity that is our ahankar, our ego, our separateness. We all have buddhi, which is that cosmic intellect. We all can draw on that cosmic intelligence. And we all have manas, or a recording faculty, to remember our sensory input. In yoga and in Ayurveda, Well, let's go to Ayurveda for a second. Disease happens in three ways. And this is like let's think a little bit less than like disease. Think about little disease, like something like something in the mind that's easy. In Ayurveda, we have three ways it happens: crimes against wisdom, the misuse of the senses, and the seasons or age, like you're just getting older and things change, right?
Time, yeah.
So in the misuse of the senses, it's either over or under stimulation. So when we misuse our senses in the sense of too much stimulation, too much Vata, too much movement, too much everything, then we start to suffer from that, and we cause imbalance in the body-mind complex. So when we have just because of the nature of the season, like you mentioned earlier, just because of the nature of the season, it's windy, it's cool. There's a lot of movement. The wind is blowing trees are changing colors. A lot of change is going on. And so if we continue that change, not looking for stability in our use of the senses, then we will create less balance in the body and move ourselves into the disease area. And like when I say disease, I don't really mean like, you haven't moved yourself over into cirrhosis of the liver, but you have moved yourself over into not feeling anxious and now feeling anxious.
Yeah.
So it's just we have the control. We individually do have the controls once we can start to divide out where we can apply our own intelligence and our own discriminating wisdom to make wise choices. So making choices, like I said earlier, with food and with everything to really affect the whole state of mind, and drawing on not only our manas, not only that recording faculty that we have, but also drawing on our intelligence above that, our cosmic intelligence.
Yes, beautiful. And it's also letting us know that not only do we have the power to do this, empowering us, but also that we have a responsibility to tune in, to be aware of what we're exposing our senses to be aware, like with Buddhi, about reflective examination of what we see, a keen awareness of our surroundings, of what we're taking in through our senses, and then having that curiosity to have that reflective examination about what's going on, so that it's not all just external output, but we're also being introspective as well, and have a keen sense of how everything is affecting us, our body and mind.
Right. Absolutely. When we look at the mind field, at the chitta, at the field of all of the thoughts that are happening, we have, in yoga, we have 5 very different ways that thoughts will express in the mind. And I'm sure everyone is going to totally relate to this. And just thinking about, maybe you've never divided it out like this, but you can totally relate to how you have more control. So there's the state of dullness, mudha, where tamas gunas does dominate. There's the state of restlessness or a disturbed state, chitta, which is where rajas guna really dominates. And there's the state of vikshipta, which is distracted, where sattva begins to rise, but rajas and tamas are kind of still fighting for it. Sattva tries to get that teeter-totter in total balance, but it's still somewhat distracted. It goes one way or the other, but sattva is trying. And then the fourth is ekagraha, which is one-pointedness. And that's where sattva really, really predominates. And I'm sure we've all been there. You've got a test to take, or you have a paper to write, and you get in the zone, and you are so one-pointed, focused on that sattva, you don't hear the phone ring, you don't hear someone yell at you, you don't hear anything. You're just one-pointed focus. And then the fifth state of the mind is nirud, or controlled. And that's where the gunas dissolve. And that's hopefully for us going to be a state that we would reach in meditation, a state where we really would find ourselves one with a greater power, right? Mm-hmm. But meanwhile, just knowing those other 4 states of mind, that the mind can be dull, the mind can be restless, the mind can be somewhere in between, trying to balance out both of those, that distracted state, or it can be very one-pointed. And sometimes we need to move those distractions out of the way. We need to move those other things that are affecting us. So maybe if you have a paper to write, you turn your phone off. Mm-hmm. Maybe if you have a paper to write, you do it write it the 2 hours in between 2 meals. So you're not either too full and lethargic or you're too hungry to focus. So we choose these things that really let our mind be in control.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to be more sensitive to that nowadays because our world is so rajasic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm. And there's so many things going on around us. And, one of the things in our Western world that's super appreciated is getting a lot done. Mm-hmm. And in other cultures, that's not necessarily the case, getting a lot done. And working overtime. That's not necessarily appreciated. You and I were talking about enjoying meal times, right? Yeah. That those meal times can be sacrosanct. They can be just a time you would not take a phone call, a time you would really sit and enjoy your meal. And just beginning to allow yourself that half an hour or however long you get for a meal to just sit quietly and appreciate your food, appreciate what's in front of you, appreciate the nourishment that you're bringing into your body. And yes, so we have so much going on around us right now. Yeah. And some of those qualities are appreciated and they shouldn't be, not so much.
Exactly. It's this glorification of stress and busyness. Taking a moment out here to bring you a word from our sponsor, Mount Madonna Institute. The mission of Mount Madonna Institute is to educate and empower future health professionals. Their Level 1 Ayurvedic Health Counselor program is the perfect entry into professional Ayurvedic training, and it is the gateway to becoming an Ayurvedic yoga therapist. The Health Counselor training focuses on preventive and mind-body healthcare. Classes are held in person and online. This program starts January 2023, and you can receive $100 off this program if you register before November 30th using the discount code ELEMENTS22. See the show notes for all the details or visit mountmadonnainstitute.org. Okay, let's get back to my conversation with Kamalesh.
So, when we go back and we think about what we can think about what to avoid. That's easy, think about what to avoid. But sometimes maybe you live in a place where it is very windy and you have to walk to work. And so that's adding 2 extra mobility things. So one of the things probably would be taking a soup with you. And the other thing would be before you leave, just sitting quietly for a little while and grounding yourself. And that might be with a meditation or a mantra, or maybe even reading something that inspires you, an inspirational reading, or something that allows you to just ground down before you walk out into that air, so that the mind is prepared for it with the state of balance before you go, instead of just rushing, and then out the door and into even more rushing.
Exactly. So think of grounding foods, grounding activities, and also, I guess, protecting yourself from those winds is really important. If you have a Vata aggravation, cover your head, your ears, and make sure that you're not exposing yourself too much to that wind, which can be very aggravating for Vata.
Totally.
So being very mindful of that is important. And you, like you said, using grounding foods, grounding activities, making sure you're clothed in the right way to help prevent any further aggravations.
Totally. Yes. And, I think the more that we inquire about the mind, and that's what we call in yoga svadhyaya, self-study, inquiry, self-inquiry, right? Atma vichara, and just beginning to understand that there is no separateness between our body and our mind, and that what the yogis and Ayurveda Vaidyas have known for centuries. It's proven now by science and neuroscience. We're going in and finding that there are brain cells all over the body, and knowing that we can't divorce one from the other. That the brain and the mind are not completely. They used to think that if you affected the brain, you'd affect the mind, and vice versa. You affect the body anywhere, you affect the mind, right? Yeah, and anytime you affect the mind, you affect the body. In Ayurveda, most of our disease begins in the mind. Why? Because we weren't paying attention to subtle changes or energies or something before it became physical. Because it exists on a subtle, everything that is in us and is a part of our world exists on a subtle level as well. And when that subtle level is out of balance, it begins to express itself in our physical level.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is a concern today because we are so rajasic in our modern world that I don't know if people are aware, even if they have a high stress, because it's the norm.
True. Yeah. And I think a really good way to look at it for all of us is to think, how often have I felt anxious? How often have I felt a little depressed? How often have I been sick this year? And just seeing if we find that balance, if we can say, well, I really haven't been sick since this year. I made it through it, still wearing a mask wherever I am, depending upon where you are. Here in Guatemala, we're still wearing a mask. And, just asking someone about their whole immunity system and just realizing the state of balance that we find ourselves in. So how is our in Ayurveda, in yoga, prana, tejas, and ojas. So ojas is our immunity, and really looking at our immunity and seeing how we are transversing the world. Are we healthy? Are we happy? Are we strong? Because I think when we look at prana, ojas, and tejas, the fire, the tejas, the fire, the coloration of our body, when someone turns pale and thin, and you can tell they don't look healthy. Prana, the energy body, the energetics of the body, their physical strength as well through prana, tejas, and ojas. So, and you look at yourself and you go, this, I'm not 100% where I want to be. And so then we start to think, what can I change? How can I help myself? Rather than, can I go to the doctor and get a pill? Right. Because usually all of it is in response to some kind of stress, where the stress be physical or psychological. But there is usually some kind of stress on the body, getting it out of balance, some kind of stress.
Yeah. So again, cultivating self-awareness and really tuning in. And in order to do that, we need to get quiet and still.
We need to get very still. We need to get very still.
Yeah, and make time for that stillness.
And I want to point out, because for some of us, we're in a windy place, but for many of us, we're going to also be in a wet, boggy place right now. Like some of us, this is our rainy season, and it's been really, really, really raining. But now the winds have come up. So what's so strange, and where we really have to pay attention to that teeter-totter, is in California weather, and just like here in Guatemala, which is called the land of eternal spring, the variation cannot be great, but those slight variations also make a really big difference in how we're doing. If it's a wet, rainy, muggy, kapha kind of day, chilly, and you can just feel that coldness in the air, and it's wet and the opposite of the Vata, then we have to think about how we're going to recalibrate, and especially when you're in a place where it can change from one day to the next. I know in California, in the Santa Cruz Mountains, it can be 80 one day and the next day it's 55.
Right. Yeah,
and that's
huge effect.
That variety is way too much. That's just very, very taxing on the body and the mind. And so I think one of the things, if I could, Babaji, my teacher, Baba Haridas, used to say, Ayurveda is for freeing the mind from the body, and yoga is for freeing the soul from the mind. So when I think of something that could sustain us, it would be something that reaches our soul, that could sustain us through all the changes of seasons. Yes. If we have something stable that we go to every single day, that helps us to develop that one-pointedness, that helps us to find ourselves and do a little bit of self-study. And there are, when we say yoga practice, I don't necessarily mean postures and asana. It may be something as simple as a breath that is balancing. It may be a mantra. It might be a mudra, making a symbol with the hands or with the whole body. It could be so many different things. It could be karma yoga, doing things for other people, just selfless service. It could be jnana yoga, which is the study of spiritual text, the study of the Bhagavad Gita, the study of the I Ching, the study of anything that makes you go beyond your own individuality, right? And so reaching into these things that help keep us stable all year can also really help us avoid any of the ups and downs of the seasons.
Such a great point. I think it's so important. And especially now, we've come out of a crazy time. We're still kind of in it with COVID. There's a lot of turbulence in the world. There's a lot of instability. And I think it's so important, as you said, to have that foundation of stability, whatever that practice is for you, but that you can go to every day, have that quiet space, that single pointed focus, that you can know that that's going to provide you with a foundation of some stability. And it's a practice that you can return to again and again.
Truly. I think it's David Frawley who divides the mind into these, and I'm sure he divides it there because it's from a classical text, but divides the mind into three layers. The inner layer, which is that layer of deep, 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 deep knowing, which I think corresponds to buddhi, that intellect, that cosmic intellect, that discrimination. And then the outer mind, which I think corresponds to manas, that recording faculty, which has all of the senses and all of the emotions. And the intermediate mind, which it's like the teeter-totter. It's the one that mediates between the two, always keeping in mind those two. So if the minute we can use our recording faculty and then color it with discrimination and good choices, right, and use our cosmic intellect, then, we've bridged that gap between our inner knowing and the outer world, which we see through sensory input.
Yes. So again, it goes back to that crimes against wisdom and the misuse of the senses, as you were talking about earlier. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about, we've already kind of started this conversation about navigating emotional times. And we just went through a seasonal change. So we're all feeling the effects of that, no matter what climate you're in or where you're living. So that can affect our body and, of course, our mind as well. So how would you advise people to navigate emotional times? We talked about having that foundation, that stable practice you go to on a regular basis. Do you have any other advice there from yoga?
I do.
Great.
Of course I do.
I thought you would.
Of course,
I'd love to give some practical advice for people out there.
Absolutely. And first, I want to tell everyone that a practice is what you make it. It does not mean that it has to be like anyone else's practice. And a spiritual practice, whatever it is, would be one of the most grounding things you can ever do to help yourself in your life. It creates stability, it creates structure, and it creates a thread that you can take with you from day to day that you can go back to the next morning for your stability. And when I say it doesn't have to look the same, it can be just putting your feet on the floor, bringing your hands to your heart, saying a quiet prayer. It can be getting up and stretching out of bed and touching your toes and maybe having a seat for a moment and appreciate the world outside of you and around you. It can be anything you make it that's regular. Regular sadhana, regular practice. It just needs to be regular. It needs to be something you go to every single day, even if it's small. And your practice can change over time. Like, when you're young and you're single and you can have a 30-minute practice every single morning, great. You can do a little bit, let's say you do a little bit of breathing practices and you do a short meditation and maybe a little bit of movement. That's a perfect practice. But then all of a sudden you have kids. So that 30 minutes has disappeared and now it's a 5-minute practice and you get up and you say a silent prayer. Or you get up and you sit and look at an image that means something to you and just try to keep that one pointed focus on that image. Something that tries to bring the mind into that ekagraha, that one pointed concentration. So you concentrate your mind for that 1 minute or 5 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is on a practice. And that done every single day forever will keep you, will do the best. That's the best thing you can ever do for yourself. In Ayurveda, when we look at all of the classical text and, everyone in the culture had some kind of a practice. A practice is just part of the culture. Where here, my kids were shocked to find when they went from here to California that people didn't get up in the morning and say prayers. So, it can be very different for all of us in different cultures. But most cultures back then in Asia and Eurasia actually had some sort of a practice, a spiritual practice every day. Yeah. So that was sort of taken for granted. And when you would go to an Ayurvedic Vaidya for something that was going on, it wouldn't be unusual for them to give you a mantra for the next month to keep you stable and happy and healthy. It wouldn't be unusual for them to give you a short prayer to do once a day. It wouldn't be unusual for them to ask you to light a candle for maybe whatever it is you're wanting, needing, or maybe the soul of someone who has departed. So it wouldn't be unusual for them to give you something to augment or change your practice for a little bit of time. And then you go back to your regular practice once you've done that. I think that's kind of where I think that's where the Catholic Church got going to confession and then having penitence, go do 5 Hail Marys. Because I've been to Ayurvedic Vaidya's and they've told me, go do a rosary of so-and-so for the next 7 days. Right. Yes. So those things help ground you and help keep you focused. It's really hard to be doing a rosary and counting each bead and moving through it, or a mala, a rosary, and think of anything else. It's really hard. So it helps your mind to bring into it that one pointed focus. For example, if you've decided that you love the Virgin of Guadalupe, you can, think of a short prayer that is about the Virgin of Guadalupe, and then you might have an image of the Virgin of Guadalupe, so that you open your eyes and you're using your senses to inform your whole self. So you have it in your mind, you have it in your vision as well. So using our senses, and this is the tantric principle of using the senses to go beyond the senses. Sometimes if you have too much stimulation, too much air, too much wind, put in earplugs. When you go outside, wear earplugs. Wear earplugs underneath your hat until you get to work if there's a lot of wind and movement. But that back to the spiritual practice. I don't think there's anything else that I could recommend for anyone more than starting some sort of a spiritual practice. And like I said, if it's just something that you do every single day. I remember my stepmother used to tell, I thought she really would do well with some yoga practices for her state of mind. And then when I went to visit her, I realized she had a yoga practice. It just wasn't what I called a yoga practice in any sense of the word. But every single morning, she would, before my dad ever woke up, she got up an hour earlier and would go into the kitchen and brew herself a pot of coffee and go take the pot of coffee out onto the sun deck. This is living in Florida, and sit there and drink her coffee and smoke a cigarette for 45 minutes in peace and quiet. Didn't want to ever be bothered. And that was her practice.
Right.
That was her practice. And I'm sorry to say the cigarette killed her. She died at a very young age. So I don't recommend that ever as a practice. But it was a practice for her mind that helped keep her mind stable through a challenging time of taking care of my father. So just to think that all of us need a practice. We all need something that's our stable thread through each and every day to keep us through all the changes in life and all the changes in seasons.
Right, exactly. Beautifully put. And as well, like you said, and I think this is important for people to realize, is that it will shift depending on your lifestyle and your commitments, particularly if you have young children and, you know, you may be up in the middle of the night with young children and you're exhausted. It could just be a minute of pranayama. It's just a moment of quietness and introspection. It doesn't have to be this big, you know, yoga practice. It could be time in nature. Like, there's so many ways you can do that, whatever brings you into the present moment, basically, right?
Right. And one of the things that I would recommend for everyone who can possibly do it when they're having any sort of anxiety is moving into belly breathing. Yeah. And, you know, if I could only ever teach one pranayama or one breath practice, it would be abdominal breath. We have so many reverse breathers, people who exhale and push the breath the wrong way. So, like, you know, just do this with me for just a moment. Just sit up nice and tall and put your hands on your belly. And then as you exhale, pull your belly to your spine. Use your abdominal muscles. Pull your belly back as far as you can. Exhale the breath all the way out. And then relax your belly and let the breath come in. And then again, push the breath out. Pull your abdomen back. Pull it back, pull it back, pull it back, pull it back, pull it back. And then relax the belly. Breath comes in. One more. Use your muscles. Pull it back. And then let the belly go and breath comes in. And then just fall back into your regular breath pattern and just notice for a moment. It brings us out of our sympathetic mode, our anxious mode, and into our parasympathetic mode, which brings us more calm into the rest and digest state. So when we can belly breathe, and I think the best way to ever do it is just lay on the floor and put something on your belly. It can be your hands. It can be a weight. It can be a block. It can be a bag of rice. And just inhale and take the belly up toward the ceiling, and exhale, belly draws in all by itself. And you can just let the breath come and go for 10 or 12 breaths. And that is a beautiful yoga practice, just breathing into the belly.
Beautiful. And a simple practice that you can do anywhere. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you can do it seated. It's just much more efficient and much more intelligent to the body-mind complex initially if you do it lying down. For people who have been reverse breathers, if you do it lying down, you'll get it immediately. If you do it sitting up, if you're a reverse breather, often you don't get it.
Yeah. And it's a very powerful practice to balance the doshas, but in particular balancing Vata, which when aggravated can move in the wrong direction. Vata is supposed to move, like especially Apana Vata, downwards, but with Vata is aggravated, they can cause a movement of upward, like burping or lots more air. So
yes, belching. Yeah.
So it's a great practice, particularly if you're feeling that Vata aggravation at this time of year. So thank you for that.
Yes. And another practice that's really good, because usually, as you just mentioned, apana is the one that gets out of whack the easiest. And it's our downward flow. It's the one that's responsible for everything coming out and down of the body. So childbirth, of course, popping out a baby would be that, but all of our digestive process. So elimination, excretion, urination, everything coming out of the body. And so when you're constipated or we have a little bit of diarrhea, we can be sure that it's out of balance, right? And finding ways to stimulate apan to go in its own direction. So one of the best ways is a simple squat. Just, finding yourself in a nice squat and just letting the body be there for, a minute or a minute and a half. Just a nice squat. It really helps all of the apana energy to go down. It is a yoga pose, but often in Ayurvedic yoga therapy, I'm not giving an asana practice. I'm not giving a posture practice. I'm giving yoga, and yoga is meditation. Yoga is concentration. Yoga is breathing. Yoga is starting to remove the senses. Yoga is being nice to people, ahimsa. Yoga is satya, telling the truth. Yoga is such a broad science. In so many ways that we can work with yoga practices to help keep ourselves in balance.
Yeah, it's so empowering as well, that to know that we can influence the mind, because so often we feel like sometimes the mind can take us for a ride and things can feel out of control. But through these simple practices from yoga and Ayurveda, we can really influence the mind and bring it to a place of more clarity and stability and groundedness.
Right. And I do think for this Vata time that what we're talking about, like being really careful to wrap your head, wear proper clothing on the way, take an extra sweater or a vest, make sure you have on some socks, things that help keep your body warm and grounded will help keep your mind warm and grounded.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All these little self-care practices throughout the day. And again, it's all about awareness and tuning in. We're very much outward in our world today, that rajasic outward energy, but we take in some time, as you're saying, daily to just tune inwards and check in what's going on. So we can prevent the bigger imbalances down the road. We can catch those subtle signs of aggravations of the qualities of the mind or the body and bring ourselves back into a stable place again before it gets out of hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Well, Kamalesh, before we finish up here, is there anything else that you would like to share today? And also I wanted to talk about if somebody's interested in learning more about yoga psychology. I know Mount Madonna Institute offers some courses on this.
Yes, we definitely do. The only thing I'd like to close with is if you're not sleeping well in the Vata season, that's also another very big key.
Yes.
And that is your mind that's being primarily affected. Because if you don't get your proper amount of sleep, anywhere between 7 to 9 hours, depending on what you and your body need, if you don't get that sleep, you can't function properly in the day. So doing very simple things like zero caffeine after 12 noon, putting away your electronics after 7 p.m., having dinner super early, 3 hours away from bed so that you don't have anything in your digestive system, in your stomach being active at the moment before it starts to make its way down. So a few really important things to ground the body and then to ground the mind. If you are not sleeping, a yoga nidra, you can find 1 million free ones on YouTube. Finding a yoga nidra, which means a deep sleep, a yogic sleep where your body doesn't go to sleep, and often yours may, and more power to you. We hope it will send you to sleep. But doing a yoga nidra, so you put away your electronics, except for you turn off and put it on do not disturb, and you put on a yoga nidra and you listen to that, go through the parts of the body, go probably through another little journey and bring the body into a quiet and still state. And if you're still not sleeping, then talk to someone about some Ayurvedic herbs that might help you. For everyone, like a little bit of chamomile can go a long way. I use like 4 tea bags when I'm in the States and have a tea bag. So don't think one little tea bag is going to help you sleep.
Double up on it at least.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So that was it. Just really reminding us that our sleep is a great indicator of how our minds are settled or not settled. Yeah. And that's the thing where the yoga practice, like even a few minutes of just quiet meditative practice right before bed can also be super, super helpful. Mm-hmm. And just trying to bring that mind into one spot. You can look at a candle. You can look at an image. If you close your eyes, you might see too many things that you going past. So often an open-eyed meditation right before bed where you're focusing on something physically can be super helpful.
Yeah, so important to calm the nervous system before bed because it's so activated all day. Good. And so if you could tell us if people are interested in studying more about yoga psychology.
Absolutely. I would love to welcome you to Mount Madonna Institute. We have wonderful programs of yoga and Ayurveda. So in our yoga program, we have the yoga teacher training at the 200-hour level where you do get some yoga psychology. You get a lot of classical text. We're teaching primarily hatha practices, and Raj Yoga or the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali form the basis of our whole training. We have a 300-hour level as well, which then allows you to register with Yoga Alliance at a 500-hour level. And then we have an Ayurvedic Yoga Therapy program. And then in Ayurveda, we also have the AHC program, the Health Counselor program. We have the Practitioner program. And for those who have a college degree, you can also get a Master of Arts in Ayurveda. It's very similar to the Practitioner program with just a little extra work. It makes it very worthwhile to end up with a Master of Arts so you can even teach Ayurveda in a college.
Yeah, amazing.
So we have wonderful programs. We're also a center that have personal retreats. We have what we call the Mountain Experience, where you can come and visit for an overnight stay. That's a day visit, or you can come and do a personal retreat for an overnight stay. And we have a beautiful view of, we're on the Santa Cruz Mountains in California, and we have the beautiful view of Monterey Bay and the Santa Cruz Harbor. So it's really a very sacred place. We have a Sankat Mochan Hanuman temple with a little temple to Ganesh. It's just a beautiful, it's a haven. It's a beautiful spot to go for a little rest and recuperation. We have morning arati every single day at 6 a.m. and again, it's at 6:30 in the morning and 6 p.m. It's a magical place. I can't recommend more just coming and visiting us at Mount Madonna.
Yeah, what a great place to study as well.
It is so amazing to be in the middle of that mountain studying Ayurveda, where you are surrounded so much by all of the elements and even the scents, because the temple, they use a lot of incense and that's just wafting down the mountain, and you feel it when you walk to lunch and dinner and breakfast. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And your programs are in person and online.
They are. They're in person, and we loved the thing that we learned through COVID, which is before we would meet once a month and then we'd see each other the next month. And now in all of our programs, we meet in between sessions online because it's so nice to keep that continuous thread going and keep all of the cohort together and, have a community of Sangha.
Yes, that's great. It is important to have a community of like-minded people as you're going through this study and your own personal journey of self-realization. It's great to have that. Truly
wonderful.
Well, Kamalesh, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this great wisdom. And I hope to chat with you again soon.
I hope so, Colette. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Kamalesh, and please check out the show notes for all the links mentioned. If you think that this conversation will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them so we can spread this great Ayurveda and yoga wisdom. Also, if you would like support on your journey, and in particular learning about this principle of opposites that we talked about in this episode today, and learning about the qualities of the mind and the body and how you can become your own healer by understanding these qualities, along with understanding the circadian rhythms and how to implement daily self-care practices. Then you may be interested in checking out my Daily Habits for Holistic Health program. This is a 28-day self-paced program, which is set up to educate you and empower you on becoming your own healer. So I'll put that link in the show notes, and you can also check out my other online services of online consultations and at-home cleanses, which are tailored to you. If you haven't already subscribed or followed the podcast, please do so the new episodes will automatically download for you. And if you would like to rate and review the podcast, I would really appreciate that. You can find me on social media under Elements Healing and Wellbeing on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate your support. And until next time, take good care of yourself, be well, and bye for now. Slán go fóill.